Welcome back to One Brain at a Time. I'm Dr. K.
And I'm Dr. J.
Well, today we have a very exciting episode.
Yes, we do.
A couple of folks are joining us to impart their wisdom and their intelligence around a subject we're very hyped about, MeRT. And we'll get into that a little bit. But David Day and Martin Dierks, welcome to the podcast.
We're so happy you're here.
We're glad to be here, and thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Woohoo! So let's get started with a little background so our listeners know who you two are. David, you want to start with just a little background of who are you?
Absolutely. So I'm a retired Navy physician assistant. I did almost 27 years in the Navy. My last 5 years I spent with a Naval Special Warfare, a SEAL team. And that's how we got involved with this MeRT technology. Around 2011 or so, we were looking for ways to help our teammates that had suffered traumatic brain injuries. And with that, the sequela of post-concussive injuries. We met and heard about this company called Brain Treatment Center, which was based out of Newport Beach, California at the time. And so that's how we got involved with the technology. My partner and I, Dr. Matt Hickey at the time, we opened NEUCOA Clinic in Virginia Beach in October 2019. So just right before COVID, you open a business. And you know how that goes. Yes. And we had partnered with a human performance group that was owned by another SEAL that we had formerly worked with. And we were brought in to do this neuromodulation component. It seemed a natural fit, this gentleman being a SEAL and Dr. Hickey having been a SEAL as well, and then myself working there at the SEAL team with Dr. Hickey. So we worked, and then COVID hit. And then around mid-year of 2020, we ended up branching off, and we took over the company completely independently, and eventually moved to our new location in Virginia Beach. Then around 2021 is when we were able to have Marty come on board with us. And Marty and I had worked very closely together at the same SEAL team. We had also deployed multiple times. And so he is my office manager and my senior neurotechnician as well at the clinic. So Marty's a fantastic human being and a jack of all trades. So it's been wonderful to have another partner on the team.
So Marty, that's quite a lead into who you are. So can you give us a little...
I'm just a guy pretending to be a guy.
I'm just a guy standing in front of a guy. So Marty, can you give us a little background?
Yeah, so kind of same storyline there. Started out in the Navy. I did just a hair over 20 years. And 16 out of that 20 years, I was at that Naval Special Warfare group that Dave is talking about. Definitely opened my eyes to a lot of non-traditional therapies and different stuff, which is kind of why I kind of fell in love with the idea of this MeRT technology, because some of my former teammates that we sent out to California had results like anything we hadn't seen before. You know, normal answer is let's just throw a bunch of meds and here's some talk therapy. And yep, that's where you're going to be. You know, this is your new normal. Get ready for it. And of course, with the community we worked in, that was not the answer that they wanted or would accept. So it really kind of helped drive, you know, the command as a whole to look for other ways to help them out. So like David was saying, you know, they got the company up and started, partnering with the other group. And then I retired in November of 2019. And what I have, Dave, maybe 12 hours of retirement before I was in doing OJT to get ready to go out to California. My wife wasn't happy with that at all. But you know, it's I think we come from the same background of having that bigger mission, the team take care of each other. Because if we don't take care of each other, who's going to take care of us?
Yeah.
And I think that is just blown up with the company and just the praise and the reviews we get from the folks. We just want to take that different approach and truly treat a person, you know, as they should be treated.
Sure.
Not a number, not a statistic, and just kind of break that mold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dr. J, can you tell us how did you connect with David and
Sure.
yeah.
So I think I've mentioned before in another podcast that I had worked with the military, and it was really the first time professionally that traumatic brain injuries were presented. I mean, I certainly knew what traumatic brain injuries were, but this was something different. And I worked with many people who also either had been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress or I clearly saw it. And I have this vivid memory of a soldier. He was probably in his mid to late 40s coming in, and my colleague said, as the two of them were walking into his office, "Oh, how you doing?" And he goes, "The same. I've been going to the VA, doing therapy once a week for 7 years, and nothing's changed." And that moment, coupled with my research in obesity medicine, I knew that the brain, there had to be something out there that could help the brain other than psychopharmacology. And let me just state that I've seen miracles happen with psychopharm, so it's not that I'm against or opposed to medication, but it was something that was an alternative. So anyway, COVID hit, and I was home, and somebody in my house had the show The Doctors on, which I had never seen before and I haven't seen since. And this particular segment was on autism. And they mentioned there was this new non-invasive brain treatment. So, of course, I'm like, ooh, I wonder if this has ever been tested on post-traumatic stress or traumatic brain injuries. Sure enough, I came to find out what a military influence was actually in this company. And we were doing a research study with the military that I was working with. So anyway, this Virginia Beach office was the one that was at the time in 2020, was the only place you could go. And when it came time for family to go, I just knew that it was a solid, well-established medical office. So that's how I referred people to Virginia Beach, and I still do.
And thank you.
So then fast forward to me calling you, and we've talked about this before on the podcast, saying, all right, I think I'm ready to do MeRT because, to your point, meds, talk therapy, all of it really hadn't moved the needle on my PTSD, OCD, anxiety, whatever you, whichever label you want to put on. And so you said, I really think the practice down in Virginia Beach is the place to be and to go. So reached out to David. We booked, because I live in Massachusetts, the thought of going down for a month just wasn't feasible. So I said to David, could I come for 2 weeks? And he said, sure. So we went down for the 2 weeks, and it was such, like, to your point, Marty, you guys are a family. And one of the things you kept saying to me during treatment was, we got you. Like, no matter what, you're a part of the family now. And I just thought, from a consumer standpoint, and for someone who has walked that line with mental health stuff, it was like, oh my gosh, I feel safe here. So I really want to put that out there, because as Dr. J and I are in the field, our number one thing with our clients is to make them feel safe, that we are a soft landing place for them. And so kudos to you and the other two wonderful people who work
I
there.
know. It really is a magnificent office. And it's so interesting with you saying that about Marty saying you're a part of the family now. I have that memory. And I wasn't doing the treatment for that 2 weeks. Like that, I was just there for support. And I was sitting in the waiting room, and I remember Marty coming out, and I forget what it was that you said, Marty, but you ended it, well, you're a part of the family now. And it just struck me. I was like, that is just warm and fuzzy, which just feels so good.
Well, we've unfortunately have been on the opposite side of that, as receiving as patients as ourselves.
Yeah.
And that is something that we have pledged to make the difference, is that every person, every patient, child or adult, is going to come through feeling like genuinely they know that we care for them. Our hearts are in this, and we want nothing but the best for you. And if there are any problems, any complications, you can always reach out to us, and we will always be there to help you and to navigate.
Yeah.
Well, I've seen it
this journey
firsthand. I mean, and I've referred some people to you folks, and it's the same thing. They're wonderful. They are so plugged in. And it really does make a huge difference.
Especially,
Yes. Yeah.
I will say, because, and I want to get into kind of the scientific clinical part of MeRT to really break that down so people understand what we're talking about. But I think we can continue this love fest. I'm all about it. But the thing is that when you're in pain, physical, mental, or spiritual, being able to come to a place, and when hope has really been beaten up, and to think about going into a space where people are offering hope, and that's a really vulnerable place to be, because you guys were strangers to me. I didn't know you. And yet here
Absolutely.
I am saying, I've tried everything, and I'm putting hope in your hands. So please come through for me. But anyways, all of that being said, so the first 2 weeks we went there, I want to say that the initial part of the process is having that brain figured out and scanned through an EEG. And
Right.
David, can you talk a little bit about kind of the protocol and process of, and let's give MeRT the full name so that people understand that MeRT's an acronym.
Sure. Right, exactly. So MeRT stands for magnetic E-resonance therapy, the E being electroencephalogram and EEG. So we're looking at the electrical activity of the brain and the electrical activity of the heart, so that heart and that brain coherence. And with the QEEG, the quantitative electroencephalogram, it's a 10-minute recording. It's non-invasive. We've done it on little kids and older adults as well. And so it's a 10-minute recording. The patient is awake, alert, quiet, and calm. What we're looking for are the four really primary brainwave activities called delta activity, theta activity, alpha, and then beta. Delta activity is typically the slower brainwave activity, 0.1 to 4 hertz, and theta activity is 4 to 8 hertz. Again, those are both slow brainwave activities. Alpha is what we're trying to identify as that key optimal frequency that we can dial you in on. And then beta activity is the eyes open, awake, and alert. So we're in beta right now, processing information. But when we do the 10-minute recording, we want the patient to be awake, alert, quiet, calm, their eyes closed as much as possible during the recording. Once we get the data, then we send it to our EEG lab, to our parent company, which is Wave Neuroscience, which is based out of Newport Beach, California. The data scientists there will process the data information from the EEG and then send the provider, so me, the report back to interpret and then discuss with the patient the results of that. And then we do get a treatment protocol that determines what is that optimal alpha frequency for the individual. And that alpha frequency can be anywhere between 8 and 13 hertz. So once that's done and we have the protocol back, we can then initiate the treatment process. And typically, first day of treatment consists of testing, doing some measurements of the head, doing some calculations, and then testing what's called the motor threshold. Once we have that, then we can start the treatment. Treatment sessions are usually daily, Monday through Friday, and they last anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. Once we've done about 9 to 10 sessions, then we'll repeat that EEG to see the effects that it has had on the patient, and if the patient's brain is moving to that targeted optimal alpha frequency. And then we can make adjustments to the protocol based on how the patient's brain is responding to what we're trying to train the brain at.
David,
this is a question for David or Marty or both. I'm just curious that what would be a low alpha? What would people potentially be feeling or experience with a low? And then I want to ask the question if it's too high.
Right. So we're looking at, like, it's not just what is the alpha frequency, that 8 to 13 hertz, but then also we're looking at the amplitude in which how much electrical activity we're picking up in the brain recording.
Okay.
So with that EEG process, when we get the report back, if someone is functioning on the slower end of that alpha, where they're on that border of theta activity and alpha, then clinically the patients may present with different symptoms. Typically patients that are coming in with depressive type symptoms, cognitive processing, memory type problems, they may have migraine headaches. Their brains are oscillating at a slower frequency. So they may be on that slower 8 hertz, or they may have more dominant delta or theta activity. And that may be due to a variety of things. When our patients come in, it's a baseline EEG, and they've been battling whatever symptoms for years. So it's hard to say if someone has had traumatic brain injuries, concussions, sports-related injuries. That impact on the brain has now slowed those hundreds of billions of neurons in their oscillation. So they're not firing off at that optimal speed. So that's our goal in doing the treatment, is to typically get that brain firing and moving at a faster frequency. And then additionally, getting that brain to have synchronous activity. That's the key, is synchrony throughout the entire brain. So the front, central, and posterior aspects of the brain are now oscillating at, let's just say, 10.5 hertz. And typically what we see is that individuals may have one low alpha density, so not a lot of dominant alpha brain activity, and it may be mismatched. So that alpha in the front may be oscillating at, let's just say, 8 hertz or 8.5 hertz, but the posterior aspect is firing off at 10.5. And then the central portion may be firing off somewhere between 9 and 10 hertz. So there's a dysregulation in that harmony in the brain processing information from occiput, which typically about 70% of the patient, the alpha is generated in the posterior aspect of the brain. So if that information is now being processed at a faster speed, but it's now being sent to the frontal lobe of the brain to express whatever emotions, cognitive processing, it's mismatched.
Gotcha. Okay.
I would say the biggest thing was being able to see that scan, to have that concrete view of that my brain was not working at optimal capacity. I mean, like, I knew that internally, but I think when you're stuck in that cycle of whatever it is, depression, OCD, anxiety, or whatever, you're left to your own thoughts. And so it's almost like the snake eating its tail, because you're like, I should be able to power through this. What's wrong with me and such? And then being able to see that concrete example of like, hey, this is
what's going on.
This is what's going on. You're not
Right.
crazy. It's
Absolutely.
It's almost like an injury to the brain. So
right. Absolutely. And that's the thing, with us coming from the spec war, the SEAL teams, that's, the guys that we had, the folks that came in, they're the elite of the elite, and they're telling us something's wrong, something's off. I don't know what it is. I've had MRIs, I've had CT scans, I've gone and seen a multitude of specialists. I've done the $1 million workup. My sleep is off. Okay, so they know I've had a TBI, multiple TBIs, multiple concussions. I've tried all these different treatment modalities, and nothing seems to work. But yet they haven't had an EEG, quantitative electroencephalogram, to check under the hood.
Right.
Right. So structurally, you can do an MRI and look at the brain and say, okay, well, yep, there's no bleed. You're good to go. Okay, get back out there. But then, it's not until we do the EEG, the QEEG, that we're able to say, okay, great. Here's it's like, here's the CD, right? The DVD. You look at it, looks good, but you're not listening to the music, right? So once we start listening to the music, now we can say, hey, wait a second. There's a small scratch here. It's not firing off as well as it should be. And when you have some elite athletes or elite special operators, they're very in tune to their body, so they know something's off. And their compensatory mechanism is suck it up. I got it.
Yeah.
And so work hard, play hard, train hard. It's just a spiral because they don't want to let their teammates down, and they just continue pushing. And to take a knee, to pause, is something that a lot of them don't want to do.
Yeah.
And then the injuries just continue to recur.
Well, I have a question for you, and Marty too. I've had folks that I've worked with that have had an EEG, and I've been told that everything looks fine. So is it possible to have an EEG and whoever is reading it is not looking for, or is it anybody that's trained to do EEGs are trained to be looking for what you and Marty look for? Because I clearly see there's something not
right. And that's the difference. Is the EEG that we're doing is a quantitative electroencephalogram, and that is patented by Wave Neuroscience.
Okay.
And so they have a normative database of over 25,000 EEGs that they're comparing, and it's age and gender matched.
Yeah.
So they're comparing that EEG to what is considered a normative database. And so that's what's different than a regular EEG. If you go in and see your neurologist, they're looking at it from just the electrical activity standpoint,
Gotcha.
but not necessarily. So it is a difference because a full EEG is going to take 12 to 24 hours. They may do, even when you do a sleep study, they're doing an EEG on you, and we know that we can see deficits in the brain activity during the awake and sleep periods as well.
So I just want to jump in because you brought up a good point, David. Myself being an elite athlete. Why are you laughing, sissy?
You were. You still can be.
That ship has sailed, David.
You're only as old as you feel.
That's true. But just going back to the first 2 weeks of doing MeRT down in Virginia Beach, I literally would walk into the office and just for kind of reference sake, let's say 0 to 10, 10 being the most symptomatic that I can be, I'd walk into the office at 9 o'clock in the morning, sit down, I'd probably be like at a 7. And that generally happens to me when I'm in someplace new where I don't know my surroundings and whatnot. And I'd walk out at a 2. And I would be like, all right, is this just because I feel more comfortable with them? Or is this really because with my brain, I have the opposite of the slow down brain. My brain goes too fast. And so I'm trying to fill in all the reasons why I might be feeling better. And at the end of 2 weeks, I came away feeling a distinct difference in maintaining more like at a 2 or a 3. And the other big difference is that I didn't crave sugar.
Right.
Like
Right.
that was something I was not expecting, because Marty,
Yeah.
after my sessions, I like those little gummy
know.
bears that you guys
Gotta
have.
have them.
And I came home and I realized I wasn't keeping my stock of dark chocolate. Like that was a mandatory thing in my life. And I remember saying to you, Sissy, I'm like, I don't have the cravings for sugar like I once had, which had been an all my life situation. And I thought that was really interesting. With whatever ground I gained in those 2 weeks, my brain was able to kind of regulate in that particular area, which I found really fascinating.
Yeah. Well, once you get those, neurons firing, you start getting that neurosynchrony. Now your neuroendocrine system is being more efficient. So you're talking about the serotonin, which obviously you get big spikes from sugar, but the dopamine and some of the other neurotransmitters that are happening, they can function more appropriate to what you see and what mood. You can walk into a room and actually feel the energy and react more appropriately to it. So it kind of gives you that ability to not necessarily crave that serotonin release you're getting from the sugar, because things are functioning normal.
Yeah. So I came away thinking, 2 weeks, I'm good. Yeah, I knocked it out of the park. Mert, yep, done. And then fast forward, I want to say, I don't know, a month or 2 later, and I said, yeah, I think I need to complete this protocol. And so we scheduled to come back for a month this time, because I said, if I'm going to do this, I want to really commit to having the full range of protocol. And at that point, Dr. J, you said that you would do it too.
Yeah, because it is something that I refer folks to. So I figured I needed to try it and see what it was all about, because our research, I got the equipment sent, and we were able to use it on civilians, but we ended up not being able to launch our research study. So I didn't get to do the MeRT. And so I was like, yep, let's do it. And so I did the full month myself. And I think I've mentioned on another podcast that I am somebody that looks at research and is very science focused. So I needed to put something in front of me that was tangible to see if my brain shifted. And it was red wine, because, I just knew from a chemical standpoint that it was increasing my GABA, and that there were times there was a direct relationship between my stress increase and my brain craving the wine. So
yeah. So when we got down there and started, you didn't even want red wine.
No. And since I've come home, which was the 3rd week in October of 2023, my alcohol consumption has cut. Like, I might drink 2 or 3 times a month.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing about it is that days will go by, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about having a glass of wine. So for me, professionally, I'm looking at this from an addiction standpoint.
Yeah.
I don't consider myself having crossed that line, but it was profound. So how can I not look at it from that lens? And I've subsequently sent people to Virginia Beach who were in the throes of addiction, and they've done their worlds have done a complete 180.
Yeah, absolutely.
which is amazing.
Absolutely. And, Kristen, I want to circle back on what you talked about, you doing the initial 2 weeks. I know we spoke about that, and I understand that being a working adult, right? Uh, being able to carve out that time to go and do treatment. That was our conundrum that we had when we were active duty, was sending our folks out to California for 6 weeks. It was typically the folks that were retired at the time, or they were in between training cycles and deployments. So time was of the essence. And unfortunately, there were folks that really needed the treatment and they just couldn't carve out 6 weeks to go and complete the full protocol. And that was a kind of a business decision that I made too, was that, look, I need to be able to offer this to people and give them some hope. So if I can demonstrate that, if you can give us 10 days, we could potentially turn your world around and show you, on the EEG what's changed, and you'll feel it too, and you may notice it from your sleep. We've seen people that'll come in and they're disheveled, uh, not wanting, not no motivation to exercise, reaching for the bottle, nicotine, caffeine, doing the pendulum back and forth between uppers and downers, right? Um, and then at the end of a treatment protocol, they're off. Their sleep is back to normal. It's a challenge because that 2 weeks, realize that that first 5 days is we're titrating you up to the patient's goal intensity. And then it's not until that second week that now the patient is at full goal intensity. So even though we can do the treatment in 2 week periods of 2 week blocks at a time, it is preferred to try to do at least 4 to 6 weeks to complete the full protocol. And then if you need to come back in 6 months or a year, you could do that. So, like in your instance, we did the 2 weeks. You saw the results. You felt good, but you wanted, there was room for improvement. There's room that we could continue to move the needle, and that's why I encourage all of our patients to come back and see us anywhere from 3 to 6 months to repeat their EEG, so that we can see how has your brain responded to the treatment. Because we know what I've seen is that even after a patient has stopped treatment, whether it's 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or 6 weeks, that their brains will continue to synchronize, and that synchronize in the alpha activity. And it may be a couple of months before some of the more significant clinical changes have occurred. And I say that because of our autism patients, and so it may be a couple of months. Now the patient's back into their normal routine, and the grind. And what they notice is that, oh, I'm able to handle the day-to-day stressors. I'm able to handle my marriage, my kids, my finances, whatever it is, better. So, I tell folks this is another tool, no different than any of the medications. The medications that are prescribed to you don't cure you, okay? They just help you cope and manage. And this is a modality in which to help you navigate that without some of the side effects that are associated with those medications.
And I also, I referred somebody to you folks in Virginia Beach, and he was able to get off of all his psychopharm. And this was the first time that he had been completely drug-free, prescription-wise, in probably 15 years.
Right.
I mean, that is huge. Huge.
Yes, yeah. And it's unfortunate because we have people that are coming and they're desperate for help.
Yeah.
And I'm straightforward with them. I said, hey, we can't guarantee, there's certain things we can't guarantee results. We know there's no guarantee in life. But I did say that, we can help you. It may take some time.
Yeah.
And so that's why every patient that comes into our clinic, I do the consultation. I usually do a virtual consultation with them or the parents, right?
Yeah.
To set the expectations and have the understanding like, hey, this is what the science is. This is what we're going to do. This is what we can do. But there's no guarantee. There are risks, and there are benefits to the treatment. So, if there's no contraindications, we can move forward, but understand, it requires you also to be willing to make some changes.
Right. Yeah,
So,
for sure.
and especially those that are suffering from substance abuse, you really, you know, you have to reflect on yourself and then still do the talk therapy.
But here's the thing is that, you know, I was at a point where I just knew, because people have gone inpatient a number of times. So it wasn't a lack of trying. And I just said, there's something going on with your brain that isn't allowing you to move forward. And I can tell you as the clinician that the progress that has been made since January has been significant. Like, we've been able to go places that have never been able to go to before because of the brain was so stuck that the thought patterns were stuck too. And I couldn't move them. And anyway, so it's just, I look at things as mild, moderate, and severe. And when I see a brain that's in the severe zone, I know that there isn't enough talk therapy that is going to move the dial. And that's when I was so grateful to find MeRT, because it's directly on the brain and you're guided by the EEG. Marty.
Well, can I just jump in real quick? Because I wanted to say, because as you guys were talking, I was thinking of Marty, our 4 weeks together, and to say I felt like I was in a snow globe and shaking it all up is an understatement. And so I think it's important to point out that obviously my journey is my journey. It doesn't reflect everyone's journey, but a really huge piece of information that came out for me and for you, Sissy, during my 4 weeks was how the impact of trauma in the nonverbal stage of life. And I would never in a million years been able to connect those dots. I could have been in therapy till the cows come home and would have never touched that. And I remember looking at you, Marty, going, am I going crazy? What is happening to me? Because during one of the sessions, my whole body started to shake. I had no idea what was happening. And I was just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, because you were so informative and being like, this is okay. This is just your brain getting it together.
Yeah. No, and kind of what we talked about through that. And, definitely going to be one of those neurotransmitters, whether it's the dopamine or the serotonin. But once that needle's starting to move and you're now relatively able to kind of dig deeper into some of even the subconscious, thoughts, memories, traumas that are going into it, and you're having that chemical physiological response to those chemicals being released. So you're getting that big flood of dopamine or the big flood of serotonin. And if you haven't had it for a while or felt kind of numb because of medications you're on that are blocking some of these chemicals, it can be a really profound experience for some folks. So usually when we get around treatment number 5, I like to let the patients know, that we're getting close to number 7. And from what we've seen through all the patients that we've taken care of, give or take a couple treatments either side, you may have that profound dopamine release. And it could just come out in emotions, driving in and listen to the radio and you have to pull over because you're now just this tear snot bucket and you don't know what happened to you, right? And then, okay, now it's over, right? Okay, what was that? And then come in and tell us about it. Or sometimes it may, pop up as dreams. We have a lot of folks come through that, they can't remember the last time they've had a dream.
Yeah.
And now they're like, I'm having these vivid dreams, is this normal? And I just smile and I'm like, I like to see that because that lets me know that you're moving along, and we
Marty,
can talk about
nobody
that.
wants to see that snot bucket.
I like
Not the
that.
snot
I'm
bucket, the
telling
dreams.
you.
The
I
dreams.
think I went through like 5 boxes in one day being a snot bucket. But you know what? To that point, I literally had this conversation with my husband a couple days ago, and we were talking about how these are my words, like how emotionally connected I am now. And I said to him, I think I would go through years with maybe crying once a year, twice a year. And if I saw something mushy on TV, I'd always be like, oh, give me a break. And my daughter never liked to watch TV with me, especially reality where they give all the heart background. I'm like, oh, give me a break. Now I'm like, oh, that's so beautiful. And I swear, those 4 weeks with you, I cried more in 4 weeks than I had my entire lifetime. And at that moment, it felt like it wasn't a good thing. And in retrospect, understanding that my brain had shut down to survive. And so I was missing out on a lot of beauty in the world through emotions. And I think that going back to what we were all saying, that this form of intervention is so much bigger to understand that when you go through it, there's just no way I could have made the progress I have made just through talk therapy or pharmacology.
And you were
It just
doing
wouldn't have happened.
EMDR, which is one of the
Mhm.
3 interventions that the deployment of psychology supports for post-traumatic stress. So you were doing everything right.
Mhm.
And yet doing that MeRT really unearthed the pre-verbal.
Mhm. And meanwhile, you were sparkling brighter and brighter every day, and I'm like, make it stop. Make it stop. I can't
Rainbows
take
and
it.
unicorns.
Oh my gosh, David.
Shooting
At
them.
that point, I wanted the wine she didn't drink.
Right. So, I didn't mention this, but when you had asked about MeRT, it is a form of TMS, so transcranial magnetic stimulation. And standard TMS is out there, and standard TMS fires at 10 hertz frequency. They can treat up to 120% of motor threshold, and the coil is typically placed over the left dorsal prefrontal cortex region of the brain. And so with MeRT, because it is personalized, now we're able to dial in at your specific frequency, not just 10 hertz. So we can go to left or right of that based on your inherent alpha frequency. And then the coil location can be adjusted as well. So those are just a couple little nuances that are different in how MeRT is personalized compared to standard TMS.
Yeah, when I explain it to people, I always mention that it's TMS, which has been around since the late 1800s, that this isn't something that hasn't been researched. But that wave neuroscience has created a new approach with the TMS, and that I've had folks I work with go for TMS, and I always ask them, have you had an EEG? And they said no.
Right.
So I then say, then what are you doing? Like, how do you know that where you're placing it and the frequency that you're putting on is the one that's, I don't know. So I feel so strongly about MeRT. I feel that it is that medical intervention that covers the brain and the human the best.
Yeah. What about, as you guys were talking, I was thinking, because I had to kind of carve up my time, so I did 2 weeks in March, and then I came back in the end of September for 4 weeks. Does the brain continue? I think I asked you both this question, and of course I can't remember, but the gains that are made, there's no retracting that, correct?
Right. There's typically what I tell individuals that are as far as patients, parents asking, is my child going to regress if it's autism, right? Or an adult, am I going to regress? Am I have to go back on medications? What is it? So there are 6 things that I typically tell everyone, very transparent again in my consultation, 6 things that I believe that can cause regression. So number 1 is if you get a head injury, if you get another concussion, that's going to set you back. How do I know this? Well, because we had one of our SEALs did treatment. Guess what? Got another concussion. And within 2-3 weeks of the concussion, he said, "Hey," he called me up and said, "Dave, my anxiety's back. It's up through the roof." I said, "Okay, we'll get in here. Let's get an EEG on you." And we were able to see the effects of the impact frontal region of his brain. And what was interesting was that the posterior aspect of his brain, where he did not hit, had continued to improve, and that he had a beautiful alpha that had continued to synchronize even after he had completed a month of treatment. So we got him in, we did treatment. Actually, by day 3 of starting him up with the treatment protocol again, he's like, "I'm good to go. My anxiety's gone." I said, hold on, buddy, pump the brakes. So let's finish out the protocol. Glad you're feeling good. But we still want to continue to work. And as we did the EEG, the repeat EEG after 10 treatment sessions, you could see the response to the brain, the neuroplasticity, and to the treatment, just an enormous jump in the amplitude and the alpha activity that his brain just soaked it up. It's like, okay, I got it. All right. And was learning to, again, oscillate back at his optimal frequency. So it is, so besides concussion, drugs, illicit drugs, prescription drugs, opioids, right? Drugs can set you back. Alcohol can set you back. Sleep. So poor sleep hygiene. Homework for our patients is get 45 minutes to an hour of sunlight every morning between 7 and 11. So if you're not getting the adequate amount of morning sunlight, that can impact your sleep and the circadian rhythm. And then the last thing is and I learned this because of COVID. So if a patient gets a significant infection like COVID, that can cause some regression. And how do I know? Because same thing, I've seen it in the EEGs. Patients have treated and they said, "Hey, Dave, I had horrible, I know COVID was bad, but some of us are like, hey, it's no big deal. And others are pretty significant. I lost my sense of taste, lost, smell, whatever it is, brain fog. And you come back in and we can see the slowing of the brain activity or the synchrony of that alpha activity is lost. So those are the things that I typically tell patients that can cause regression. But barring none of those, then the brain typically will continue to synchronize and ideally to your optimal frequency. And we've seen that more commonly. I've seen it in the children with autism that we've treated. Just some incredible gains in their alpha activity. And the parents will call me back, say, "Hey, yeah, we're ready to come back for more treatment." And we do the EEG, and just pleasantly surprised to hear that that the child is doing much better. And also we can see it on the EEG that it's objective finding that we're showing to support that, hey, yes, what you're seeing, we're believing. And it's not just the parents, right? You're hearing it from friends and family, teachers, therapists that are taking care of these individuals, or for the adults, coworkers. "Hey, are you okay? What's going on?" Or family members that are seeing you and going, "Hey, is everything okay? Yeah, what's going on?" No, just
Nice.
things are different.
Yeah.
Something's different about you. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't flip out during the budget meeting today. What's wrong with you? Are you feeling okay?
Marty, I have a question for you. What is it about your position that gets you up in the morning? Like, what is it that pulls you to do the work that you do?
I don't even have to think about that one. Is the results that we see.
Mm-hmm.
I've got into medicine because I wanted to help people.
Yeah.
In your standard, family practice or even emergency medicine, you can have an impact on people. but I didn't know that you could have this much of an impact, not just for the individual that you're treating, but their entire social network,
Yeah.
their immediate family, their extended family, their coworkers. It's, kind of talking to the point of, you know, connecting with everything, including the spiritual side of it. We've had some people that decided they were going to start going back to church, and it's like something their wife wanted them to do for a while. They're like, I just don't really believe in it. Ultimately, they just didn't want the crowds. They didn't want to be
Yeah.
asked questions.
Yeah.
And now they're openly accepting that vulnerability and that emotional roller coaster and starting to re-engage with people. So for me, just to know that I know I'm having a meaningful impact on somebody's life every single day I walk in
Yeah.
here.
That's powerful.
And we've treated couples. It's kind of funny.
Really?
It's
Oh, yeah.
oh yes, we've seen where one the spouse, let's just say an active duty service member that comes in, and the spouse is curious about what's going on, and then we offer them up and said, hey, how about let's check under the hood, let's see what's going on. And we all have something going on.
Sure.
And so we take a look, and you want to give it a try. And sure enough, they do. But we've saved some marriages
I
as well.
bet.
Wow.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, that I didn't even think of that. As
Me
Yes.
neither. Being a couples therapist, I forget. Oh, I can refer couples to you guys.
Absolutely.
that is
Absolutely.
that is fantastic. Awesome.
And I know that when the FDA approved this originally, it was approved for depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, migraine headaches, and tobacco cessation. And we're using it off-label for the PTSD, um, ADHD, substance use disorder, sleep. We have folks that are just the sleep hygiene, the insomnia, chronic pain.
Yeah.
We've helped individuals with chronic pain, and that's just the cortical brain treatment of breaking that pain cycle. We had someone come from the Air Force Special Operations Command who had hardware in his spine, and we couldn't target his spine with we call it our Thunderstick 2000, our peripheral coil. We said, we can only do your brain. But this gentleman had been uh, through the myriad of medications and procedures, had spinal cord implants, everything on, full regimen of medications. His pain specialists have been taking care of him for the better part of 7.5 years. And within 2 weeks, we were able to get him off of his narcotics. He was pain free. His wife was just absolutely amazed; she couldn't believe it. And his anesthesiologist, pain specialist, was called and was like, "What the heck are you guys doing? How is this possible?" So we're breaking that pain loop, that cycle.
Mhm.
So
Well,
yeah.
I can
That's
speak to
amazing.
that because I was in so much pain with my left hip, and that wand that you used, I walked out of that office that day and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the first time in months.
You didn't walk out. You were dancing.
I know, right? And then every day we come in, Marty, can we do PMERT, please?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, that's half the reason I could get her to come back with me. Have you guys ever had anyone come through that it did not move the needle at all?
That in some instances, yes. It also depends on how long they've done treatment as well.
Okay.
So the answer is yes, but it also how much time are you giving us to work? And there are some things. And I go back to the autism patients, but sometimes autism is just a big spectrum, and we don't know the root cause. So that can be very challenging to move the needle. There's different domains that we may impact, and maybe behavior, but then there's no changes in communication, sociability, things like might change there. So, but yes, there have been some patients that haven't had as good of a response, and it also depends on what's their baseline. Some
Yeah.
people are that's why the EEG, when I go over it with them, and if you've had 30 plus concussions and TBIs, understand that it may take more than 2 weeks. It may take more than 6 weeks to move the needle. And that's actually one of the EEGs that I show them is one of the individuals I had. The lowest amplitude I had seen in anyone was 0.9 millivolts. And I'm like, that's not a lot of electrical activity that's being generated in the brain. And so this is going to take some time to move this. But as we do treatment, patient starts to feel better. So it's encouraging. And, I'm never selling it to the patient. When patients ask me, well, when should I come back? Well, you've done this treatment protocol this round. You let us know. We'll always repeat the EEG, see where the new baseline is and what's changed, and then continue to drive you to your optimal frequency.
I have a question that when I was getting the research study ready with the military, I would ask people if they would participate. And I had a few people push back on me, like, I don't want anybody messing with my brain. I'm afraid, like, what will happen. Can you speak to that doing MeRT is not going to change a personality. It's not going to change the essence of who a human being is, right?
Right. Yes. And because I've had
it's
patients
not like a lobotomy.
Yeah. Right. Well, and we joke if you're not a pleasant person, the A word, you may still be so we're not going to necessarily change your personality, because I've had patients, the autism patients, where parents have said that I like my child's personality. We're not going to change your child's personality. Or the intelligence, right? The intelligence of, I have a family, the child is genius level, and they're concerned about affecting his capacity. Very interesting to hear was that the child said, yes, I know that my ability to do these complex mathematical computations has decreased by about 5 or 10 seconds, but my willingness to communicate and express myself is more present, more prevalent. So he says, I'm willing to trade that off for that. So it's not going to change necessarily a personality, or the perception of others may be different.
Mm-hmm. So as we come to a close, I just wanted to ask two things. One, how do people get in touch with you? And two, was there anything we didn't cover that you think is important to put out there?
They can visit us at our website, which is www.NEUCOA.com. So that's November Echo Uniform Charlie Oscar Alpha.com. They can shoot me an email as well. There's a link there for info@NEUCOA.com. And that's the best way to get in touch with us is via email. And I'd be happy to send them the information about MeRT background and then set up a consultation.
Okay, great. And lastly, I know we were starting off with the Love Fest, and I think we need to end with the Love Fest, and just can't thank both of you enough for your time, but what you do, because personally, having experienced it, it is life-changing, and I will be singing from the mountaintops to anyone who listens that it is effective and it has changed my life, and I can't wait to come back to do 2 more weeks and just make sure you have a good supply of those gummy bears.
Oh yeah, keep them on stock.
The organic gummy bears. But we are an affiliate of Wave Neuroscience, so I just want to caveat that. And I'm very transparent with that. When someone inquires about MeRT, I definitely want them to know that there are other locations available. We're not the only game in town. Wave Neuro is international as well. I think there's 15 or 16 locations internationally. And within the U.S., there's over 60 locations as well. And each location is typically independently owned and operated. So the business model is a little bit different, but as far as the treatment protocols, as long as they're following Wave Neurosciences protocols, you can go to any of the Wave Neuro facilities and still receive the same treatment type of protocol. But they don't have Marty.
There's no Marty. You beat me to it. There's no Marty and there's no Paige.
And Haley.
So.
I love little sweet Haley.
Yes, the secret sauce.
Well, this has been fantastic. And again, I personally had a child go through MeRT, and nobody knew it. But I started to hear back from family members, oh gosh, they seem like they're doing really well and a lot happier. And I, as a parent, was able to see the change in my own child after going through MeRT. So as a mama, I got you. I mean, it is, it's amazing.
We've had a run. I know Marty knows this for sure. We've had a run of actually teenage girls that have suffered sports-related concussive injuries and the post-sequela of that, migraine headaches, and then the mood. And, it's a teenage girl, right? So chalked off to hormones as well. And they've tried the myriad of medications and everything, desperate. And they come to us and same thing. And it's a privilege for us to take care of every patient, so to hear the impact that we're having and a patient who's pain-free and now has their quality of life back, you just can't put a price tag on it. It's just absolutely amazing.
Well, I'm going to share with you that somebody from London reached out to me, and I told them Virginia Beach. So I may be a little partial here, but it's just thank you both so much for talking to us and sharing your passions with us, because it's made a difference in both our lives and hopefully with our listeners, that they have gained some information and at least they know that there's something out there that should they need it or someone in their family, that it's there.
Absolutely.
We're here.
Thanks, guys.
You're welcome. It was great seeing you all.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yes.
Bye-bye.